Good morning and welcome to this week's special edition of Halftime Talk. I'm absolutely honored to have one of our top commentators on the Daily Energy Markets podcast join us for this special edition of our feature interview series, Danial Rahmat, one of Iran's leading energy analysts. Danial, welcome. Thank you for joining us.
Hello, Sean. It's a great honor to me to be here again.
Well, I have to say the connection is amazing. I don't think we've ever had a cleaner connection to Tehran. Your screen looks good. You look good. So let's start where we're at right now on a personal basis, on a sense of where things are at. We're day 55 of this conflict since Israel and the US attacked Iran. And Iran retaliated in its strategy of reaching, and as you said, I think the last time you were on the podcast, the days before the war started, that Iran would retaliate by targeting the regional infrastructure, which indeed it has done. But on day 55 now of this conflict, we are on, I don't know what, day 15 of the ceasefire that is now described by Donald Trump as an indefinite one. So from your perspective, sitting in Tehran, is this war over? What's your assessment of the situation as of today?
The war is not over. Absolutely, it's not over. Because the aftermath and the consequences of the war has remained. And especially, I'm speaking about the Strait of Hormuz, which is still closed, and this is not something that the world wants and something that the world can tolerate. The shortages of the products, especially the crude and refined products and petrochemical products, has not yet touched every part of the globe. You know, the shortage has reached the Southeast Asia and East Asia, and this is going to go to Europe and to America, and the prices are going to hike, and the markets are going to realize that this is not the reality. As you see, the gap between the physical oil and the future is due to this optimism that markets have that oil is going to come back to the market. So you know much better than me that if this market realizes that this is the reality and the shortage is going to be so huge, there would be a big collapse in the financial markets and hike in the prices of gas and other products in the whole world. And this is going to end up in a very big, a huge recession that we are not sure to what extent is going to damage the supply chain. So I'm 100% sure that this is not going to be this is not an unstable situation.
So if the war is not over, the war being Israel-US attack on Iran 55 days ago and Iran's retaliation, and we're now 15 days into an indefinite ceasefire in which there is, it seems the war has moved to the Strait of Hormuz. I'm not sure. How would you describe the current situation? If the war isn't over, what are we currently in? From an Iranian perspective, from Tehran perspective?
I call it an American dilemma. You know, Donald Trump has started a war, let's say an obvious invasion to Iranian territory with killing hundreds of Iranian innocent students and directly assassinating the leader and the commanders of the military, as we expected. We talked before about it. And his assumption was, okay, this is going to end very quickly like a Venezuelan model, and Iran is going to surrender. But Iran didn't do so and used its every leverage it could use to actually hit them back and kick them out of the military operation, and their navy went deep inside the Arabian Sea and we could keep the Persian Gulf. Despite the serious damages and hits to Iranian military, Iranians resisted very, very obviously, and they could actually save their political system and, of course, the territorial integrity of the country. So in the military scene, Americans gained limited success while lost actually the whole operation goals. None of the operation goals were met. And the thing is, okay, when you have reached such actually a point, are you going to continue fighting for something you have already lost? If the answer is yes, it's going to be a catastrophe for the whole region because Iran is going to actually escalate the crisis.
So
with
do you think, I mean, again,
clusters.
coming back to the point of where are we now, if it's not if it's still a war, what would are you still expecting that the US could strike Iran again, that we could get back to? Is Iran anticipating that this conflict could still get hot again?
I think so. I think so. Because you know what Iran has kept as hostage, the Strait of Hormuz, is the global economy, is the bottleneck of global economy. Iran has the potential to take the Bab el-Mandeb Strait as the second hostage if Americans strike and you know to escalate the whole situation. This is American decision whether for resolving the first one they are going to put the second one at risk or not. Iran has taken this, and Iran believes that its resilience, considering a lot of land borders with many countries, including Turkey, Afghanistan, Turkmenistan, Pakistan, Iraq, to survive under the huge pressure of the actually naval blockade. While
The problem with that strategy, at least the problem that I see, and I'd welcome your thoughts on it, is that it's not hurting America at all. We saw even yesterday, after the failure of the second talks to happen in Islamabad, the US stock markets went to a record level. Both the first time in the 55 days of this conflict, you had both oil prices rising and stock markets rising. There's no real economic pressure on the Americans to change. There's pain. The Iranian strategy is certainly successful in creating a global economic consequence, except the only target that is hardly touched is America.
To answer your question, I would refer to your own actually recent article about why markets are very positive and optimistic about what's happening in the market. You know, they are not considering the risks. There are major risks that would threaten American economy due to continuation of the situation. The first one is the timing of the wave of the crisis, economic crisis going to hit America. Markets are very soon going to realize that the sole factor in this actually tackle approach towards the ongoing crisis in the Middle East is not Donald Trump. It's now Iran who is imposing the economic pressure on the world, not Donald Trump's decisions. So it's a matter of time that America is going to touch the problem sooner or later. I think within 6 months they're going to the problem to the global supply chain is going to damage American economy. Considering this, I would tell you that Iran is going to actively try to increase the pressure on Americans' actually hegemonial presence in the West of Asia. You know, Iran is going to push the allies of America, including the Gulf countries. Okay, so tell me whether you want to remain in the same security arrangement you used to be with Americans or you're going to change it. So with pushing actually the allies of America in the region with this way or the other, Iran is going to try to use all its leverages against America, both politically. Look, everything is not economic pressure on America. The first major pressure Iran is imposing is actually hitting the Americans' actually prestige and reputation in the region. You know, they dragged every Arab ally to the fight with Iran without actually giving them any kind of actually security umbrella. Most of their air defense was focused and was centralized around Israel to defend Israel, and that was not successful enough too.
Do you think looking going forward from here in this war that is not over, but yet is in some sort of frozen economic face-off, that everybody is waiting for, as we were earlier this week, for the US and Iran to meet in Islamabad, that we're still waiting for that to something to happen in the main stage. But in the
Mhm.
off stage, in the second and third stages that involve many other countries, like you mentioned, do you think we could see sort of secondary stages negotiations like Iran and the Gulf states, or, we've seen Iran facilitate countries like Pakistan and India to get cargoes out of the Gulf in bilateral agreements. Do you think we could see more of those types of, forget about waiting for the US and Iran to do a deal? Let's look at where there might be other deals to be done.
There will be talks, but I think everybody is rationally waiting to see what's going to happen between Iran and the States. And I believe that the mediation of countries like Pakistan, considering their goodwill for end of this crisis and their ties with Saudi Arabia and Iran at the same time, we had the experience of making a very big deal with the Americans, which is known as JCPOA. Well, whenever Iran agreed to actually send out a huge volume of enriched uranium actually to Russia as a part of the deal, but they very easily came out of that and put that on the trash. I think the experience of making a deal with the Americans, and with the change of a president, they will throw it out. Actually, having two rounds of hard and long talks with Donald Trump's Witkoff, and bombing Iran at the table of the negotiations has taught Iran that making a deal with America is a very complex issue, and the result of the negotiations on the table should be first determined on the front. At the same
Should be what?
time,
Sorry?
at the front, at the war,
Yeah.
you should come to the balance with Americans at the war first, and then go to the table.
Is
I
this
think
why they didn't go back to Islamabad on Tuesday? That
I think what they have asked Iran and pushed Iran to agree with, according to Iranian sources, is what they couldn't gain on the front lines. So you're not going to give up what you have not lost in the front line in the negotiations table. Iran has a very long experience losing things at negotiations tables, or sometimes losing things that you could sell at the negotiation. There is a spectrum in Iranian contemporary history. Iran, while had won the war in 100 years ago, 100 something years ago, and in Afghanistan, we had conquested Herat, but we lost it to the Brits in negotiation table, and we had gained FOV in Iraq in the 8 year war with Iraq, while Iran could make a deal on that and use it as a leverage. So it is a dilemma whether you're going to continue your strategic patience to the level that what you have gained is actually is not useful,
well, it
or
does seem like in that regard, that the sum of the parts here, culturally, historically, currently, that the US and Iran are so far apart on all levels, not just on the issues, but even the team in America is not America. It's not Washington. It's Trump, Wiskoff, and Kushner. It's what is that? It's not even representative of. It's like this private interest. So it's very difficult to see how these ever come together. and hence they didn't earlier this week. And I don't see how they do going forward. But the one that I wanted to ask you about is, where is China? How should we understand Iran's relationship with China? Because obviously there's been a lot of expectation. Oh, China was going to get involved. China will do something. China has a lot at stake here. But yet China doesn't seem to be changing its typical risk-averse posture. We'll send a nice letter, but we won't get involved. How do you interpret the Chinese-Iranian relationship at this point?
Sean, that's a very important point I wanted to come to and tell you about the secondary negotiations. China is still a very major player, but in silence. China and Russia are the two sole major suppliers of weapons and ammunition to Iran. Iran needs their support both for buying Iranian crude and selling Iranian a lot of things, including weapons and or spare parts of weapons Iranians building domestically. So this is not a
And that
neutral
continues to
position.
this day.
I'm sorry.
That is the current position. That's the current
Absolutely.
situation.
So, but the point is, going back to the Iranian position, I told you that Iran is not optimistic about Americans' goodwill, and Iran believes that what they have not gained in the front, they are trying to gain on the table. There is actually a strategy, which I'm not yet confident that this is the current strategy of the Islamic Republic, which was okay when they come out of every deal, when they actually betray us, they actually on the negotiation table, let's make a deal with Americans under a bigger deal, which is Russian-American deal on Ukraine, or a Chinese-American deal, which is now the case. I believe that Iran really wants China to put Iran on the table as a part of the agenda in any possible Chinese-American final master
I
agreement
mean, when they
to
meet next
shape
month in Beijing.
Yes. This is Iran's actually part of Iran's strategy. Until then, because the Strait of Hormuz cannot remain closed forever, and attacking Iran to reopen that would cost the whole world much more. This could be Donald Trump's second loss in the same war. Donald Trump could be the sole president of the United States who has lost the war two times.
Yeah.
And Iran believes that it's resilient enough, if everything is destroyed, to reach the point that China would make a deal with Americans, and as a part of that, Iran will be dealt. So Americans cannot betray this actually deal or come out of it very easily. So China's role is very important. But
Although the
still
Chinese were a
think,
party of the JCPOA and they were unable to defend it.
they were a part of the JCPOA, but the JCPOA, President Rouhani was a very actually pro-West president, and he believed on increasing the level of Iranian Western ties to a level that they can be replaced with Chinese companies in Iran. When he came in Iran, he very rapidly threw out Chinese companies from Iranian major oil fields, and he did it by his own decision. The next President Raisi, as you remember, did indirect talks with Americans through Russians' mediation. So he believed that under the Russian diplomatic umbrella, he can make a deal with Americans. But the mistake was, well, they were very much engaged with Americans in Ukraine, and the priority was not Iran at all. And at the best, in the best situation, they could sell Iran on the negotiations table to Americans in return for Ukraine.
So if you just follow through on your thought there about the Iranians wishing to see the Chinese include Iran as part of their grand bargain with with the US next month when Xi Jinping and Donald Trump meet in Beijing. Would
This
that
could be Iran's preference.
would the sort of one and one is two then mean that there will be no change to the current circumstances on the ground before Trump and Xi Jinping meet in China, I think in less than a month from now, that the Strait of Hormuz will remain in its current state until that meeting?
This could be the case, but there could be, more escalation if Americans continue to seize Iranian vessels around the globe. And in retaliation, of course, Iran is going to hit or seize vessels or tankers in the Persian Gulf. Or at the same time, if there is kind of stronger mediation between Iran and America, they could, flare down the problem to see whether there would be a deal between Chinese and Americans.
Well, let's look at the idea that
Sorry,
there's
Sean,
no.
I
Please go
don't
ahead.
believe Americans are going to accept Iranians' conditions to keep the Strait of Hormuz to get money from the vessels passing through. And this, in practice, would, in the American public opinion, mean that Donald Trump has lost the war.
Yeah, I don't, to be honest, I don't think the American public is paying too much attention as it goes into summer and baseball and hot dogs and all the usual things. And the stock market is still great and I've still lots of money and I have my job. I don't think they're really paying too much attention here. So I don't think this situation changes much before the Trump-Xi Jinping session. I don't think Trump wants to risk a hot war again and going to Beijing with a lot of stress in his life, and the current status quo seems to me to prevail. So my question is, how long can Iran sustain this? As I understand it, the blockade on Iranian ports, all marine traffic in and out of Iranian ports, means that Iran's oil storage tanks will become full in the next few days, and Iran will have to start to shut in oil production like we saw in Iraq and Kuwait. Can you tell me what is the outlook for the Iranian oil and gas industry in these coming days and weeks, leading, if we take that no great change is expected on the strait between now and the summit between the US and China?
Well, you're right. If the blockade continues, Iranian oil industry will be under huge pressure. Considering the volume of Iranian production, we have something about 1.5 to 1.8 million barrels of exports, which is a surplus to the domestic consumption. Part of that, I'm not saying more than 500,000 barrels. In the best possible scenario, if every infrastructure is prepared, can be exported, let's call it smuggled to Turkey, to actually Caspian countries, to Pakistan via rail or tankers, which is going to cost a lot for Iran. But this is not going to be a very successful approach. So at the end, Iran needs to use the sea to transport its oil. Considering the type of Iranian oil reservoirs, if you don't produce too much oil, most of them, for recovering the oil production, you will need investment and time, especially in the heavy oil part. So we need to wait and see. This is not a good horizon for Iranian oil industry. Of course, if the sea is blocked, this is going to damage Iranian oil industry.
What about exporting out through the Caspian? I remember years ago, Iran did an oil swap with Kazakhstan, I think. Is there any model there?
The infrastructure on the Caspian Sea, the Amirabad oil port, is designed to import oil from Kazakhstan and Russia, not for exportation. There can be some modification, but it takes time, and the pipeline is already built for 1 million barrels per day, but the port itself is not capable for exporting oil. We had a contract with Russians in 2015, which was never implemented, that if Iran is sanctioned, Russia would guarantee buying Iranian oil, but not from the north, from the south. So this is not going to be a very immediate
What about
actually
the
solution.
oil that Iran had already got out of the strait and was seen as sort of floating storage or on the high seas already before this conflict started? Has all of that been already sold? Is that now done?
No, a huge number of barrels still exist out there, uh, but this is not going to last forever. Something about 30 million barrels is still floating, 30 to 40 million barrels still floating, which is going to be a big, actually, money for Iran, but not forever. Considering 1.5 million barrels of average Iranian oil exports, this is going to last for 60 days maximum. And no, this is not the solution.
And does
For
China remain the main destination of that oil?
Yes, yes. Most of that oil goes to China. Little of that goes to India, other countries, including South Korea, and some European countries like Italy have negotiated with the Iranian National Oil Company to buy some Iranian oil. But Americans at the same time have issued a waiver for Iranian oil exports, and they are seizing Iranian tankers around the globe. And if they
But that's
start to seize
expiring
Iranian
soon, isn't it?
tankers, they
The
have said that
waiver.
they're going to extend that. Yeah, they are going to extend it. I've heard that they have sent messages that they are going to extend it for more 30 days, considering the situation in the oil market. From that, if they continue seizing Iranian tankers, there would be no guarantee that someone would dare to buy that oil from Iran. Use of hard power is very different. Violence has its own miracles. When you use your hard power against another country, the others would take it into consideration that the risk is higher than expected. This is not the sanctions risk. This is going to be actually the risk for the lives of their actually sailors. There's going to be the risk of the existence of your
Well, the
assets. And
Chinese also seem to be vulnerable to that risk. The U.S. Secretary of Finance has warned the Chinese banks.
yes, they are, because at this stage, when Iran and America have already, there is always something called the gray zone of conflict. When you come out of the great gray zone of conflict with someone, you cannot come back to the previous situation, to before the conflict started. Iran and America are now out of the gray zone of the conflict, and they are trying to make a new balance, not for creating peace, for creating a new gray zone of conflict. Just dive into that and remain, showing your muscles and teeth to the other side to say that, okay, this is the new balance. The question is whether Iran can dictate its balance to America or not. And America is not going to accept it, because they think, okay, this is going to be a greater loss to their hegemony to China in practice.
Well,
So
do you think, is there a case where Iran risks overplaying its hand? I mean, there has been reporting of divisions within the Iranian new leadership. I don't want to give that too much sort of credibility, given the propaganda from the West and all sorts of different directions. But does the new leadership, is it clear to you who the new leadership in Iran is? And B, is there any real sense that it's fractured?
uh, it is a very, very Iranian model that would be very hard to explain. It has always been here since thousands of years ago. While the fraction, I'm not calling that fraction, while the debate is real, while the dialogue is real, while you can see the fight inside the system, in the political scene, in the military scene, in the economic scene, everything is real. But it is inside a very closed circle, and the closed circle understands its own actually interests. I'm not saying that every decision coming from the closed circle of the decision makers in Iranian establishment has always resulted into good answers, but we are confident that they have taken their own the systems which is overlapping the country, which the interest of the system with all their actually brain capacity, thinking capacity. So they are going to make their own best decision. There are always debates about whether we can trust Americans or not, whether they're going to normalize, or they're seeking real normalization of their ties with Iran or not, whether Americans are going to prefer their own interests to Israeli interests in the region. All the debates have always been ongoing, and this is still the
So
case.
we should expect that the Iranian pieces that make up this government, this regime, the army, the government, the president, the religious theocracy, all of the different courts within the one box will hold together.
Absolutely right. And please consider that a country which was hit in 2000, actually, citizens of the country were killed, the leader of the country was killed, top commanders of the military was killed, and it believes that it has won a fight with the world's largest military power, and together with all its regional allies, should be and rationally comes to be more radicalized than what it used to be before.
I suppose win is a big word in the sense of what that means. It certainly survived, and is that a win? And if we're still in the war, then we can't really say we've won it yet on either side. It seemed to me this is a war that there's just all losers. Like the Iraq War, there was no winner. America spent trillions of dollars, thousands of lives. They killed hundreds of thousands of Iraqis. There was no winner. Afghanistan had no winner. Just a lot of losers. And here is another one, it seems, where there is a lot of nobody is winning here. People are surviving, but it doesn't strike me that there are winners. Let me just, sorry, you wanted to say?
This is your context is a very actually humanitarian context and also at the same time economic. But ideologic wise, the winner of the Iran-Iraq war was the Iranian actually revolutionary actually regime, because surviving such a war guaranteed or ensured the regime's existence for a long time, and then it could spread its ideology around the region.
Yeah.
In this war, this is even a much bigger win, because America started attacking Iran with saying that the map of Iran is not going to remain the same, killed the leader. He said, okay, they're done, but they're not done. So this is a very huge political and ideological success in the region. This has already touched many thinkers in the Gulf region. They're now thinking that, okay, why we should continue with Americans if they're not going to support us? And this is the moment, this is the point that at least IRGC had staked for decades.
Well, it's certainly in that sense, there's a lot to think about without there necessarily being any real clarity yet of answers. And we are all part of the bigger, the 10,000 pound gorillas. China, America still have to do their thing. We are down here somewhere, and there's so many moving parts. I just want to finish, Daniel, with one very oil industry piece, and that is, if you said that there's about 1.5 million barrels of oil exports per day, before the blockade started, and maybe 500,000 of that could be smuggled or got out in some kind of analog way, trucks, trains, pipelines.
Mhm.
What happens to the other million? Which fields would be closed in? Which would be the most likely to start to see production closing in on?
This is going to be a question where the mm, highly uh, actually close to the oil production sector should answer, but rationally, the ones who have higher cost, the ones who are further from the actually domestic refineries or to the infrastructure that's going to help Iran export its oil through land are going to be closed. The older oil fields like Ahvaz, the major onshore Iranian oil field, if I think this is going to remain operational because if you close it down, if you shut it down, there would be much higher cost to start actually producing oil from that field. So I think Ahvaz will remain operational. Some others which are related to private companies should keep operating because the National Iranian Oil Company has take or pay contracts with some such private companies. So I believe that it very much depends on several factors, but the infrastructure and the distance to the refineries and actually the formulation of the oil, if it fits one refinery, this is going to continue. So there are many elements going to
Yeah,
be
I
involved.
would have thought that there was many. I would also, as you, I'm glad you mentioned, but as I think, obviously the aging oil fields and the difficulty of restarting production at some point, because I know, of course, Iran has a lot of experience in that of the destruction of its oil production capabilities over years and years of sanctions. That is being is something you're very familiar with, and I think that would probably be at the front and center of the thinking. Listen, we could talk all day. It's been great to check in with you. It's great to see you looking so well. And Danial Rahmat, Iran's leading energy analyst, thank you for your time on this week's edition, special edition of Halftime Talk.
My pleasure, Sean, and thank you very much and the whole team.